Hello, and welcome to Historical Humans Reads, where we take primary sources and bring them to your screen. I'm Colum Coleman, and today we are reading from The Picture of Dorian Gray by Irish novelist Oscar Wilde. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a mystical and cautionary tale about the ill effects of selfishness, self indulgence, and debauchery. The Picture of Dorian Gray was censored upon its publication in 1890 for what was viewed at the time as scandalous depictions of homosexual desire. It would not be until 2011, 121 years after its original publication, that an uncensored version of the novel would be published. Oscar Wilde would be sentenced to 2 years hard labor and solitary confinement for homosexual leanings, in part as a result of this novel. Today, we will be reading from Chapter 2 of The Picture of Dorian Gray. With that, let's begin. As they entered, they saw Dorian Gray. He was seated at the piano, with his back to them, turning over the pages of a volume of Schumann's Forest Scenes. "You must lend me these, Basil," he cried. "I want them. They are perfectly charming." "That entirely depends on how you sit today, Dorian." "Oh, I am tired of sitting, and I don't want a life-size portrait of myself," answered the lad, swinging round on his music stool in a wilful, petulant manner. When he caught sight of Lord Henry, a faint bluish colored his cheeks for a moment, and he started up. "I beg your pardon, Basil, but I did not know you had anyone with you." "This is Lord Henry Wotton, Dorian, an old Oxford friend of mine. I have just been telling him what a capital sitter you were, and now you have spoiled everything." "You have not spoiled my pleasure in meeting you, Mr. Gray," said Lord Henry, stepping forward and extending his hand. "My aunt has often spoken to me about you. You are one of her favorites, and, I am afraid, one of her victims also." "I am in Lady Agatha's black books at present," answered Dorian, with a funny look of penitence. "I promised to go to a club in Whitechapel with her last Tuesday, and I really forgot all about it. We were to have played a duet together. 3 duets, I believe. I don't know what she will say to me. I'm far too frightened to call." "Oh, I will make your peace with my aunt. She is quite devoted to you, and I don't think it really matters about your not being there. The audience probably thought it was a duet. When Aunt Agatha sits down at the piano, she makes quite enough noise for 2 people." "That is very horrid to her, and not very nice to me," answered Dorian, laughing. Lord Henry looked at him. Yes, he was certainly wonderfully handsome, with his finely curved scarlet lips, his frank blue eyes, his crisp gold hair. There was something in his face that made one trust him at once. All the candor of youth was there, as well as all youth's passionate purity. One felt that he had kept himself unspotted from the world. No wonder Basil Howard worshipped him. "You are too charming to go into philanthropy, Mr. Gray, far too charming." And Lord Henry flung himself down on the divan and opened his cigarette case. The painter had been busy mixing his colors and getting his brushes ready. He was looking worried, and when he had heard Lord Henry's last remark, he glanced at him. He hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Harry, I want to finish this picture today. Would you think it awfully rude if I asked you to go away?" Lord Henry smiled and looked at Dorian. "Am I to go away, Mr. Gray?" he asked. "Oh, please don't, Lord Henry. I see that Basil is in one of his sulky moods, and I can't bear him when he sulks. Besides, I want you to tell me why I should not go into philanthropy." "I don't know that I shall tell you that, Mr. Gray. It is so tedious a subject that one would have to talk seriously about it. But I certainly shall not run away, and now that you have asked me to stop, you don't really mind, Basil, do you? You have often told me that you liked your sitters to have someone to chat to." Halliward bit his lip. "If Dorian wishes it, of course you may stay. Dorian's whims are laws to everybody, except himself." Lord Henry took up his hat and gloves. "You are very pressing, Basil, but I'm afraid I must go. I have promised to meet a man at Orleans." Goodbye, Mr. Gray. Come and see me some afternoon in Curzon Street. I am nearly always at home at 5 o'clock. Write to me when you are coming. I should be sorry to miss you. Basil, cried Dorian. If Lord Henry Wotton goes, I shall go too. You never open your lips while you are painting, and it is horribly dull standing on a platform and trying to look pleasant. Ask him to stay. I insist on it. Stay, Henry, to oblige Dorian, to oblige me, said Hollywood, gazing intently at his picture. It is quite true. I never talk when I am working, and I never listen either. And it must be dreadfully tedious for my unfortunate sitters. I beg you to stay. But what about my man at the Orleans? The painter laughed. I don't think there will be any difficulty about that. Sit down again, Harry. And now, Dorian, get up on the platform and don't move about too much or pay any attention to what Lord Henry says. He has a very bad influence over all his friends, with the single exception of myself. Dorian Gray stepped up on the dais with the air of a young Greek martyr and made a little mew of discontent to Lord Henry, to whom he had rather taken a fancy. He was so unlike Basil. It made a delightful contrast, and he had such a beautiful voice. After a few moments, he said to him, Have you really a very bad influence, Lord Henry? As bad as Basil says? There is no such thing as a good influence, Mr. Gray. All influence is immoral. Immoral from a scientific point of view. Why? Because to influence a person is to give him one's own soul. He does not think it his natural thoughts, or burn with his natural passions. His virtues are not real to him. His sins, if there are such things as sins, are borrowed. He becomes an echo of someone else's music, an actor of a part that has not been written for him. The aim of life is self-development, to realize one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. People are afraid of themselves nowadays. They have forgotten the highest of all duties, the duty that one owes to oneself. Of course they are charitable. They feed the hungry and clothe the beggar, but their own souls starve and are naked. Courage has gone out of our race. Perhaps we never really had it. The terror of society, which is the basis of morals, the terror of God, which is the secret of religion, these are the two things that govern us. And yet, just turn your head a little more to the right, Dorian, like a good boy, said the painter, deep in his work and conscious only that a look had come onto the lad's face that he had never seen there before. And yet, continued Lord Henry, in his low, musical tone, and with that very graceful wave of his hand that was always so characteristic of him, and that he had even in his étendards, I believe that if one man were to live out his life fully and completely, were to give form to every feeling, expression to every thought, reality to every dream, I believe that the world would gain such a fresh impulse of joy that we would forget all the maladies and medievalism and return to the Hellenic ideal, to something finer, richer than the Hellenic ideal, it may be. But the bravest man amongst us is afraid of himself. The mutilation of the savage has its tragic survival in the self-denial that mars our lives. We are punished for our refusals. Every impulse that we strive to strangle broods in the mind and poisons us. The body sins once and has done with its sin. For the action is a mode of purification. Nothing remains then but the recollection of a pleasure, or the luxury of a regret. The only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it. Resist it, and your soul grows sick with longing for the things it has forbidden to itself, with desire for what its monstrous laws have made monstrous and unlawful. It has been said that with the great events of the world take place in the brain. It is in the brain, and the brain only, that the great sins of the world take place also. You, Mr. Gray, you yourself, your rose-red youth and your rose-white boyhood, you have had passions that have made you afraid, thoughts that have filled you with terror. daydreams, and sleeping dreams, whose mere memory might stain your cheek with shame. Stop, faltered Dorian Gray. Stop, you bewilder me. I don't know what you say. There is some answer to you, but I cannot find it. Don't speak, let me think, or rather, let me try not to think. For nearly 10 minutes he stood there, motionless, with parted lips and eyes strangely bright. He was dimly conscious that an entirely fresh influence were at work within him, yet they seemed to him to have come really from himself. The few words that Basil's friend had said to him, words spoken by chance, no doubt, and with wilful paradox in them, had touched some secret chord that had never been touched before, but that he felt now was vibrating and throbbing to curious pulses. Music had stirred in him like that. Music had troubled him many times, but music was not articulate. It was not a new world, but rather another chaos that it created in us. Words, mere words. How terrible they were, how clear and vivid and cruel. One could not escape from them, and yet what a subtle magic there was in them. They seemed to be able to give a plastic form to formless things, and to have a music of their own as sweet as that of viol or of lute. Mere words. Was there anything so real as words? Yes, there had been things in his boyhood he had not understood. He understood them now. Life suddenly became fiery colored to him. It seemed to him that he had been walking in fire. Why had he not known it? With his subtle smile, Lord Henry watched him. He knew the precise psychological moment when to say nothing. He felt intensely interested. He was amazed at the sudden impression that his words had produced, and, remembering a book that he had read when he was 16, a book which had revealed to him much that he had not known before, he wondered whether Dorian Gray was passing through a similar experience. He had merely shot an arrow into the air. Had it hit the mark? How fascinating the lad was. Hallward painted away with that marvelous bold touch of his that had the true refinement and perfect delicacy that in art, at any rate, comes only from strength. He was unconscious of the silence. Basil, I am tired of standing, cried Dorian Gray suddenly. I must go out and sit in the garden. The air is stifling here. This has been an excerpt from the Picture of Dorian Gray on Historical Humans Reads. If you enjoyed this video and like to hear more excerpts from original texts, please subscribe to be notified of the next one. If there is a work you would like to hear, be sure to like the video and leave a comment listing it below. Also, please be sure to check out our new web store, Humanitarian Collections, where the proceeds from anything you purchase go to the Trevor Project, an organization dedicated to suicide prevention among LGBTQ youth. Thank you for listening.